Welcome, it's the Matt Sager Podcast, Friday, January 25th. I can't believe they're actually doing a live version of Rent on Fox. I wasn't a huge fan of Rent. Honestly, in retrospect, it kind of sort of made commodities, co-opted the whole idea of poverty and, of course, the AIDS epidemic, homelessness in New York City. It's like, no. This is all a bohemian lifestyle. No day but today, let's shoot up and have orgies. But it's possible that my less than positive recollections about Rent, some of them I really stand by. You go over that script again, you watch those plot points take place, and it really is making light of a lot of very serious topics, almost certainly with the good intention of bringing them to the spotlight, but still, it hasn't aged well in my opinion. We'll see how that pans out after the live show airs on Fox, what the critics have to say, both about the production and its performances, and about the underlying story that it's telling. But it is possible that I'm going into this whole idea of Rent with a little bit of prejudice, because I had a rather traumatic incident, not really on the scale of actual trauma, which I do address on this show from time to time. This didn't scar me or anything. Nothing like that. Gave me a rough couple of days. So around the time I was transitioning out of radio, deciding I wanted to do voice acting and just plain old regular acting, but just getting out of K-Rock, which had become very uncomfortable for me. My great agents were sending me out on all kinds of auditions, and I booked a lot of jobs. And I had a sort of niche wherein I could play the before character in a before and after. So like, look at this skinny little punk ass loser. And now look at some other guy. And that's what the army does. So don't be Matt. Join the army. Be all you can be. And I believe it was actually a commercial for the military that I was leaving when someone approached me. We were in either a film studio or possibly a casting director's office. I really don't remember what stage of this commercial was going on when this happened. But a stranger approached me and said, "Excuse me, do you sing?" The honest answer to that is I do. Perhaps it would have been better if he'd asked, "Can you sing?" Because I sing all the time. Around my apartment, in the shower. Back then on K-Rock, there were fewer and fewer songs on the playlist that I enjoyed. But when those songs did come on and the microphone was off, I'd warble and caterwaul along to the music. So never wanting to turn down a potential opportunity, I said, "Yes, I sing, kind of. Why?" And he said, "Well, we need a new lead for Rent. So here's some scripts with songs. Memorize them, sound awesome, be really confident in your performance. Try some dance steps, too, while you're at it." Now, had he asked me, do I dance, this whole debacle could have been prevented, because that's a no. I mean, I dance, but no one would ever consider casting me in anything remotely professional because they're not insane. I don't dance well, is my point. So at the time, the woman I was dating was a real live singer. I was actually occasionally even playing her music on K-Rock. She was an accomplished musician and a very good singer, and a pretty bad liar. Because I spent the first day with the script, memorizing the song at 525,600, blah, blah. And I spent hours on it, got together with her the next day and said, "Listen, I've been given this potential opportunity." And she was like, "Oh, wow, that is crazy." And I said, "Yeah, but they want me to sing." And immediately, without even hearing me, her eyes went to the floor because she's just not a good liar. It's not in her nature. It's one of the things I like about her. We're still friends to this day. It was so cringy. Oh, God. Even just in front of her. Like the most compassionate, accepting audience one could hope for. And she just couldn't take her eyes off the floor and look me in the eye. She could look askance and go, "Yeah, that was pretty good." Or look way down to the floor and go, yeah, no, you're really, really good. But she couldn't make eye contact and tell me I was doing good. And I knew it. Over the weekend as I rehearsed, there were comments from the neighbors. None of them were especially flattering, nor should they have been. I was not under the delusion that I had anywhere near the kind of talent. Again, I'm judging Rent as a pretty subpar musical, so, weird sort of dark horse properties and people can find themselves in fantastic, unexpected positions. I would not have ever predicted, for instance, that Donald Trump would become president of the United States. So it's not unfathomable. I taught myself how to be a voice actor, how to be a disc jockey. Maybe I could teach myself Rent in 48 hours. Yeah, I couldn't. That's pretty much really, the singing was okay. I mean, I knew I was bombing, but I didn't freak out about it. I was just like, all right, I was very stoic about it. I'm here. I'm going to do the best performance I can do. It's terrible. He's going to be polite and maybe we'll be friends or something. But then when he was like, "Now incorporate the dance," I hadn't even really, I tried over the weekend to get that down, but it was not, no. I'm not a song and dance man. I love going to the shows. I'm a big Broadway fan. On a recent episode of this podcast, I was sort of lambasting the epidemic of award shows we have in this country, how ridiculous it's becoming. And I made a point of calling out the award shows that should be sacred cows, that should be absolutely safe. Because honestly, many of these award shows are some combination of irrelevant, redundant, masturbatory, stupid MTV. Sorry, a little thing in my throat there. But I made a point of saying the Tonys should always continue. The theater is so precious and has so very little in the way of recognition compared to TV, movies, etc. So it's entirely possible that on Sunday I'll tune in to watch Rent, because if it's anything like the other live broadcasts that Fox has done, it's entirely possible that there will be a lead who is as bad or worse than I was in that audition. And that might bring me a little bit of closure to the whole Rent saga. On a more serious topic, this is so troubling. I tried to do a show about this on Wednesday and ended up just giving up because the rage just overtook me. So I'm going to try and just get it out there, be very concise, not linger, and not really editorialize overly much, because I will go into that dark, angry place. But The Atlantic, unlike the rest of the world press, who's known about these allegations against Bryan Singer dating back to the 90s, The Atlantic has spent the last year following up on this story. Even though he was director of Bohemian Rhapsody, he was so despised, so violent and vile and mean and divisive on set that he was actually fired from the production 3 weeks before it wrapped. That is a very significant move. When your film is all but complete and you sack your director, that is serious. Nowhere near as serious, however, as the allegations made against him. Not only the ones we knew about and that were known when he was hired on Bohemian Rhapsody, but The Atlantic did this shocking story in which they described speaking with over 50 confidential sources, and in particular 4 kids now entering adulthood, completely scarred, traumatized, living with PTSD. Because as I said last night, nothing that 2 consenting adults do is wrong. But the key words there are consenting and adults. The horror stories about Bryan Singer are really better left to this article, which I'll link to in the description for tonight's podcast episode. But they're horrifying. They date back to Apt Pupil, which is somehow now, just thinking about the production of that film, is now millions of times more creepy than the actual Stephen King story about an SS officer recruiting a young kid, teaching him the ways of fascism and Nazism in his basement. Singer's presence is as haunting as anything in that story, if not more so. There were several lawsuits at the time. Last year, December of 2017, there was another lawsuit from a man in Seattle named Cesar Sanchez Guzman, who said when he was 17, in 2003, he was raped by Bryan Singer. The very next day, one of Singer's ex-boyfriends, one Brett Tyler Skopek, published an interview in Deadline Hollywood talking about drugs and orgies and children. Very, very disturbing. Other stuff in this Atlantic piece is so troubling. These people's lives really were destroyed. Trauma is not, when you're a victimizer, that moment can live with you just for the 1 second and you can go about your day. Especially if you're Bryan Singer and you're still getting hired, getting access to children, being allowed to film in school showers, where he was apparently a monster on the set of Apt Pupil in 1997. It did nothing to harm his career. It harmed the kids, though. They talk about depression, substance abuse, PTSD, suicidal ideation. It's horrific. And Singer, like Kevin Spacey, this is hard for me to talk about because I'm neither a member of the gay community nor am I a victim of childhood sexual abuse. I had other childhood abuse. I had adult sexual abuse, harassment in the workplace, attacks in the workplace. Nothing like being a 15-year-old or a 13-year-old in the shower on a film set where giant burly guys all around me are sort of cordoning me off with their walkie-talkies and their VIP laminate badges, and a director saying, no, turn around. Let me be your first kiss. Don't tell anyone or you'll go to jail. You'll get in trouble. And it's not just that he's a monster. Like Harvey Weinstein, he was protected. All people had to do, even the laziest advocate for the protection of children, could have just said, no, we're not going to hire Bryan Singer. He's fairly talented. He's not some god who we must allow to direct our films and therefore risk the lives and safety and well-being of children and the path that their lives will take as a result of this trauma. He was protected because he was just one of the boys. Boys Club, locker room talk. Even as I'm saying this, I'm watching news reports pop up on my Apple News app about Leaving Neverland, a documentary that premiered tonight at Sundance, 4 hours or so in length. And it is shocking. As the title would suggest, it's about the days of Michael Jackson and the Neverland Ranch. And there are these kids, and the now grown-up kids, who go into great detail and back a lot of it up with photographs, video and audio tapes, and detailed stories about having their choice as to what kind of sex they wanted to have and with whom, and being at an age in which sex with anyone is unacceptable, of being just tortured by Michael Jackson, psychologically scarred, nonstop, just horrible story after horrible story about sex. And of course, as with Singer, no one will believe you is the headline in the Atlantic article about Singer, indicating the sort of threats that Singer would leave his victims with. Don't tell anyone. They'll think you're crazy and lock you up. I'll be fine. And as sick of a comment as that is, he was probably correct because that's how well protected he was. So as I said earlier, I am a heterosexual man. without direct experience being abused sexually as a kid. So it's very hard to express my anger while still really respecting that I'm not a part of this story in any way. I relate to abuse. I relate to trauma. I'm very protective of children under any circumstances, and I'm extremely anti-sexual assault of any gender, age, whatever. But fortunately, GLAAD took up this argument for me because Singer, like Kevin Spacey before him, another child sex abuser, is falling back on the, oh, you're coming after me because I'm gay. I've known for decades that there was going to be a story published about me someday because I'm a gay man who's a success. And I don't know what it's like to be gay in Hollywood or anywhere else. I know that in many cases, I believe much less so in entertainment, but in general, look, there's no denying that in many circles, it's one of the few prejudices, few bigotries that's been allowed to exist. And yet for Singer to co-opt that as a bulwark, a shield against allegations is sickening. It's A, misleading. B, he's basically parroting the talking points of the most anti-gay, hateful, far-right people like Mike Pence, who happily equate child molestation with homosexuality. You know, you don't know what these gays are doing. They're not just having sex with one another. They're having sex with 8, 9, 10, 11, 12-year-olds. And for first Spacey and now Singer to go, yeah, well, of course you're mad at me. I'm gay. And now the witch hunt begins, right? Meanwhile, there are dozens of victims who just want a life back. I don't know what their odds are at getting it back. But GLAAD, for their part, that is the Gay and Lesbian Alliance Against Defamation. They've yanked Bohemian Rhapsody, once a contender for Best Picture at the upcoming 30th Annual GLAAD Media Awards. And they're asking for others to take action. So please, every time you hear, as this story develops, every time you hear Mr. Singer or Mr. Spacey talking about any of these alleged events, keep in mind that GLAAD, the advocates for the gay and lesbian LGBTQ community, are horrified and want nothing to do with this man, and are even penalizing Bohemian Rhapsody as a result. And I have to tell you, it is so very difficult now. You know, a full year after Me Too and Time's Up, it is so hard to separate the art from the artist and to know whether a film and all the people who worked on it in good faith deserve to be punished for having a director who was a monster. And yet, I do know how I'd feel if one of these was my kid. I would want to scorched earth, forget this film ever existed. Who cares about movies when kids are getting raped? It's fairly simple, actually. The question is, the Oscar nominees were announced just like 2 days before this article showed up in The Atlantic, maybe even just 1 day. It's been a very hectic week. Whether the Academy withdraws their nominations will be interesting to see. Similarly, the film won a couple of Golden Globes. Will those be rescinded? Has that ever even happened? Is there precedence for this? I think what we're really learning here, you know, there's these individuals like Kevin Spacey, Michael Jackson, Bryan Singer, but the deeper truth is that there's a machine protecting predators, and that's what needs to be dismantled. If someone had come up to Bryan Singer the first time he did a shower scene with a 13-year-old boy and made him take his pants down, and then showed up at his house the next day with flowers or money or threats, if he was pulled aside and said, listen, you're off of our set, you're done, you're never working for us or anyone we know or do business with again, and if they'd called the cops, this would not be an issue. And something serious does need to happen. At the time of this podcast, Friday, January 25th, 2019, Singer is still attached as director of the upcoming Red Sonja film. Absent an investigation, he should be fired, in my opinion. He shouldn't be judged automatically. There shouldn't be a witch hunt, nor should his many horrifying, you've got to read the story, his many alleged victims, spanning decades, nor should they be denied justice, and no other children should be placed in harm's way, hence an investigation. And if he's cleared, that's great. Start rolling, by all means. And I love Bohemian Rhapsody, and I want it on the Oscars, the GLAAD Awards, and everything else. But I can't get around childhood sexual abuse. There's a line. There's a point where things stop being sort of in a gray area. There's a point where I get a little bit objectivist, just for a moment. Not the creepy elements, which Ayn Rand had plenty of that. But that at a certain point, good is good and bad is bad. There's white and there's black. And in some situations, there really is no gray. And until Singer is cleared of these charges, he needs to be kept away from film sets, producers, actors, and above all, children. So I think I got that off my chest with minimal rage, which is a big step up from Wednesday when I was just red with boiling blood. And I still am, but I think I've got it under control. I'm hopeful now that action will be taken. Anyway, get in touch with the Matt Sager podcast over the weekend. Email me, matt@mattsager.com, or call 646-535-4788. You can also get me on social media, where on Twitter, I'm @MattSager. On Instagram, I'm Real Matt Sager, and on Facebook, got a bunch of pages. My personal page is The Matt Sager. My voiceover page is Matt Sager VO, And most importantly, if you're listening to my voice right now, you want to check out and like the Matt Singer podcast page, which is facebook.com/Matt Singer podcast. Also, check out the links in the description for tonight's episode for both my Patreon, patreon.com/Matt Singer, and my merch store from my good friends at wehavemerch.com. They produce some really cool stuff with the Matt Singer podcast logo, like t-shirts and hoodies, coffee mugs, stickers, and I think some more stuff. Do check it out. And as for everything else, my voiceover reels and contact information, articles, blog posts, more social media profiles, and archived back episodes of this podcast, you can find all of that and more at mattsingervoiceover.com.